Hi everyone, my name is Kate Montserrat and I am Director and Co-founder of Simplify Consulting. I'm delighted to be joined here today by Jane Brown, who's a lead consultant at Simplify Consulting. Also joined today by two of the directors at XCF Consulting. So we've got James Dorrington, who is Risk and Governance Director, and Kunjan Patel, who's Operations and Technology Director. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
So really excited to talk about controls, believe it or not. So I think ourselves, Simplify Consulting and XCF Consulting, very passionate about controls. So we wanted to do a joint podcast on this particular topic. And we're going to be covering the past, present and future, and looking at the journey of controls. So James, kind of coming to you first of all, I guess we had this discussion before, didn't we? It's a bit of an odd name in terms of controls. Yeah. Why do we call them that? You know, where's it come from? Where's the need for documentation come from, etc.?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked me that, Kate, because I have absolutely no idea, but I have some opinions. So, yeah, I think, I just through the course of work recently, and as you say, we were discussing it, but it just sort of entered my mind recently that I think it's a slightly odd word for what it actually does. So, I had some sort of preconceptions, but I went back and had a look at this kind of the lineage, let's say, of where controls come from. And, people may or may not be surprised to hear that, this concept doesn't come from necessarily financial services. So obviously, in all the work that we do, and lots of people hopefully that are listening to this probably work in the financial services sector, and they'll be attracted to this pod because of that fact. But really, when we think about what the mechanism of a control is designed to do, this really comes from things like the energy industry, the airline industry, things like oil rigs, which have a real duty of care to protect human life. So if we think about what can happen when you get things like Chernobyl and Fukushima, which I think most of us have probably lived through, and the effects of that, not only to employees involved, but people who sort of live in the surrounding area. The airline industry actually had a bit of a seminal year in 1985 because there were various kind of terrorist incidents, but also planes catching fire on the tarmac and not really having a playbook as to what to do when those things happened. So those industries really needed to start to look at how they reacted when something bad was going to happen, something bad did happen. What did they need to do to get maybe some early warning or a safety mechanism in place to let them know that something was going to be a threat to human life? So if we fast forward a little bit, so that's more kind of late 70s, early 80s, and those industries needed to document processes, needed to think about what they did when, like I say, when something bad was going to develop. So if we fast forward into the 90s, we then get, unfortunately, a few kind of financial meltdowns in the banking industry. So, being in the UK, the Barings one always springs to mind, Nick Leeson, Rogue Trader, so on and so forth. So, people, I think, will find it interesting to know that before these things happened, humans being humans, we don't necessarily plan ahead and think, what if something bad happened one day? We kind of need it to happen before we think about it. So then we get to Basel. That comes along, and the need to document controls and think about anticipating in the same way safety mechanism, safety valve, so on and so forth. We need to start to document because of Basel and the things that came before it. And then we get to Enron, early noughties. For people that don't know what happened with Enron, you should really go and Google and read up on it. So we then get Sarbanes-Oxley that comes along off the back of Enron, and the need again to kind of go up another notch. And it's really then that we see serious regulation forcing firms to get controls in place and document what they're doing to test them. And that was then really this kind of real sort of lineage and where we came from, and which then made me question even more this word control, because we're not actually controlling anything. What I think we're doing, if you map out a process and your points of failures, and then trying to do something around the root cause, is we're flagging up, we're getting early warning mechanisms, we're getting safety valves. And then, you kind of see these words creep in about preventative and detective and reporting and mitigating. So I can't really answer as to where the word control came from, but I think we all understand the meaning of it, and that's the important thing, I think, in terms of the work we do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think whilst regulation was a big factor in raising the importance of controls, it really is just common sense as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
So I think, Kunjan, what are you seeing kind of today, currently, in the market in terms of kind of attitude towards risk and control?
So I think as implementing GRC systems for organizations, what we tend to see is when we ask for controls library and stuff, it's a huge volume of controls. But
Yeah.
if you look at the details of the controls, some of them are, I mean, the verbiage and stuff is very difficult to say whether it is a control and stuff like that. There's this, however, what's happening now is that originally organizations had functions where everyone was working in silos. But with all these GRC systems coming in and everything we are trying to put in one place, there is this effort where they're trying to have everything in one place. They're trying to standardize the way they define controls and stuff like that. Well, because we get involved at the point where we are implementing a GRC system, obviously the clients that we work with have the appetite and they want to standardize stuff. And the first place where we start is that you need to have standard definition of control, a standard and guidance and a policy in place. Then there's the other aspect where now you have organizations like UCF and stuff, which give you a list of all the regulations and inbuilt libraries where, the proper controls defined. You have everything from the control mapping to the process to the regulation and stuff. But when you start looking at that, those libraries are so huge. For any organization to actually go and implement it, it would take more than a year to get it embedded. So I think we are seeing improvements. So we are seeing that organizations want to get their act together. They want to put controls in place, which are actually controls. I mean, most of the controls are like people doing stuff day-to-day activity, which is just common sense. So I think when you're working on a GRC tool, you want stuff to be there, which is an actual control, let's say, that needs to be reported and stuff like that. So there is change, but again, controls, most of it, no matter what you write, it is what the human person does in the organization. So most of it is not automated. So it's like you can have whatever you write, but it's just common sense what the person does. So, and I think most of the people working in an organization know what's right and wrong and how to flag risks, right? But I think in terms of automation and stuff, I think we're quite far away yet. Though all this AI mania is going on at the moment, but we're quite far from there. And I think when we talk of investment regions and investments and finance, where there's regulatory requirements to report breaches and stuff, you have systems in place which automatically tell you when there's a breach, and those are like automated controls, so they work quite well. But in other areas of organizations like HR and operations and stuff, it's not that automated is what we see so far.
Yeah, definitely. I think so we do a lot of work in the operations space, don't we, Jane? And the maturity of control identification documentation could still be improved in some areas. I think, to be fair to the people in operations, like you say, there aren't loads of tools out there for those daily controls that are just, you know, operated on a daily basis. It's all quite manual. Operations tend to be very busy focusing on, you know, day to day, servicing the customer. And whilst obviously control is a part of that, we've actually seen that some firms have struggled to even know what their controls are. So, you know, we've done quite a bit of work in helping those firms understand where their controls are in the process, and then actually with a fresh pair of eyes, are those controls in the right place? Are they the right control? Are they in the right place? Are they even needed? Because a control is an investment in time, and therefore, you know, needs to add value on some level, whether that's mitigating a risk or you know, being preventative or whatever the purpose of the control is. So I think there's still quite a way to go, isn't there, in terms of looking to the future and how technology can help that. I guess one of the buzzwords at the moment is AI. We can't not talk about AI. So Jane, what are we seeing in terms of, you know, AI, and I guess how that can help with in terms of control identification, assessment, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a place for AI when we talk about controls. You know, we know that it can look at a lot of data and interrogate it, look for trends and for themes. And one use case that I quite like to use is in the advice space. So, you know, it's a really key regulation for advisors to provide suitable advice, and they can obviously receive huge fines if that's not the case. And AI can be really powerful in sort of looking back at historic recommendations that have been made, looking for themes and similarities around customer profiles, financial situations, and recommendations that have been made in the past, and actually passing ones where it makes sense to do so, but also flagging where, you know, there's an exception to humans to then investigate further and ensure that, you know, for this particular scenario, the advice was right, even though it doesn't match the profile of advice that's been given to customers in that same sort of profile, financial situation and with their objectives. So I think it is really powerful, and I think it could be used a lot more as well in supporting the operation. But I am a big advocate for the fact that it won't replace humans. I think
yeah, definitely.
it can only go so far, but I think it can help a great deal with supporting, picking out anomalies and things that need further investigation.
I think in terms of the testing, it can add so much value, can't it? As opposed to just maybe sample checking, which currently happens. I guess you could 100% check whether you want to do that or not, and whether that's a principle that you'd want to adopt, because potentially that might take accountability away from an individual, question mark. But yeah, there's huge value, I think, in terms of the future of technology and how potentially that could help really improve the robustness of the overall control environment.
Yeah, but one thing, so something that a few GRC providers are getting into, and some other software firms, is because I think what's important to understand about AI is that I don't think it's realistic, as we just touched upon, that it will ever replace a human. But like all technology, like with the birth of the internet, it's just an extra tool that you now have available, isn't it? It's labour saving.
Definitely.
So, you know, the software that I was just referring to is, when Kunjan was talking about, so I think what firms have a massive challenge with is, I actually feel sorry for a lot of firms, because they almost overcompensate. So they have these reams and reams and reams of controls documented, and people are struggling to keep up. They're probably have too many head count because it becomes a day job, etc., etc. But there is new software now that will scan through and look for similarities. So if you find the same control dotted all over the firm, and people are not in a position to communicate and find that out, it will identify that for you. So I think that's a massive step forward, and the benefits of that in being able to save the firm so much time and not replicating and duplicating everywhere. And when Kunjan was just sort of name dropping UCF, what UCF and similar firms do, like SCF as well, is so they will collate all of the certification stuff across the industry for the cyber world, things like NIST and ISO, so on and so forth. And the big thing associated with that is lots of firms, particularly that are tech focused in what they do, need all of these certification these days to give the customer and other stakeholders that trust. So there's very much a kind of test once ambition for that. So they want to pass all these certifications, but they need to prove that they're testing all of these controls. Of course, all of these certifications have very similar controls. So if you can use AI to line those up and say, I've done one test and I've certified 6 controls in one go, I think that's kind of the flavour that I'm whittering on about, where AI will save people and firms a lot of time and cost, and just being able to focus on the value add.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think that's an area where it will really help.
Yeah.
And we see this time and time again, actually, when we go into clients, say that have got different propositions that they, log their controls for, and we'll do some analysis into those controls, and you'll see them different on each proposition. One might be much more streamlined and perhaps automatic than another proposition that's doing it entirely manually. And whilst an organisation might wish to communicate cross proposition and share best practices, and in reality, as Kate was saying earlier, operations is really trying to get the job done and taking that time out to actually do that analysis across, and are they using the best of everything, is something that people don't really have that time or appetite for, do they? So
that's a brilliant point, actually, Jane. I wouldn't sort of rush off from that one, because I never thought about it that way, and probably should have been. But if people are performing similar controls across the firm, but one is doing it better than another, is there a tech way of identifying that and sharing that? Yeah, that's a great point, actually.
Yeah, I think tech can be a real enabler
there.
Definitely. Fab. Well, massive thank you to XCF Consulting. Thank you, James. Thank you, Kunjan, for joining us. And thank you, Jane, as always, for your contribution. Both of our organisations' details will be flashing up on the screen now. So if you want any further information from any of us, then please get in touch. Please visit our website. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you very much.